You probably just watched me dry ice blast a couple of cars, but it wasn't this one. It would be nice if this one was as clean as the other two, but it just isn't. With no wheels on it, it's hard to get it there to blast it, so that's what I hope to make change today. This one isn't undercoated anything like the Gallants were. It's very sparsely coated and just a kind of here and there kind of thing. There's many large areas that got nothing at all. In Japan, as we all saw, they coat everything, but this car is made in America where they don't. The subframe and steering were restored and reinstalled in previous videos, and I got really granular with those jobs because they're fairly difficult and strange ones to do. The knuckles all got rebuilt too. I'm not keeping any secrets, it's all here. I need to check and see with the whiteboard if this is okay before I start. Better not mess with me this time. Yeah, I think we're good. Don't have anything to say. Where were we? Oh yeah, with all the prep work fully mastered, all I really have to do now is unwrap things, open boxes, and put all the things where they go. That's the easy part, and it's going to start with the coilovers. But after watching those Gallants get blasted back into newborn perfection, I feel obligated to give you something nicer to look at than this. All the stuff that I'm bolting together looks so perfect, I just have to. So I'm going to do this the manual, old school, old-fashioned way with mineral spirits, scrapers, brushes, and rags. I'm not afraid of a little work, but this is actually kind of a lot of work, and it's a lot of rags. It still doesn't do anywhere near as good of a job as dry ice does, but it's going to be good enough for a YouTube video. And of course, it takes a whole lot more time. It's messy and it's stinky, but you can produce results with it. Just add that much more time to it and it keeps getting better. I'm doing both wheel wells because we're putting all the front suspension parts together today. I spent about 3 hours on both of them to get them to the point where I'm happy with them. It would only take about 40 minutes to dry ice blast this same size area, at least with as little undercoat as what I'm seeing on here. Much more efficient. Does a better job, and there's a lot less scrubbing, but at some point I gotta call this. 3 hours is enough. You can see crust still up in the wheel wells. You'd need to get a scraper in there to get all that out. That's too thick for the rags. And I'll still do a little bit more to it, but I'm not going to film all this. It's enough just to show you how I did it and to let you know that it's done, and that's why it looks so terrible. Really, it only looks good from a distance. The theory is that you're thinning the undercoat so that it wipes off, but it's slow going because you only really thin its outer skin. Eventually you get it all thinned out enough to wipe it all away, but you can always get it cleaner with more time and more rags. You can't really soak it because it evaporates and it gets sticky again. You gotta work for it. After dry ice blasting, you'd think I'd never do it any different, but you gotta put wheels back on it to get it there. So let's get this one over with and get to the not so time-consuming fun part of assembling things. Yeah, sure, buddy. Nice rust-free wheel well and strut tower. Now get on with it. I bought brand new factory nuts for these brand new coilovers, and they're blue zinc. The original ones that came with the car were yellow zinc, but they turned brown. Well, fortunately for me, for spending so much money on new coilovers, they came with brand new yellow zinc hardware on them so that I didn't have to buy new ones. Isn't that just swell? Aside from the subframe, steering rack, and sway bar bushings, I've torqued nothing else, and I'm not about to start. That's how I prefer to do all this. I'll be torquing and marking all the bolts later. Brand new upper ball joint and wishbone. Can't tighten the bushings until the wheels and tires are on the ground. Just using my hands all over the bolts, for heaven's sake. Just look at them. All that time with the chases, taps, reams, wire wheels, chemical baths, all the tedious preparation that lets me put these parts together by hand without a fight, and everything fits. There's the strut fork. Oh, you ruined it with the impact. In my defense, I can't compress a cast steel flange with my fingertips yet. I'm still working on that one. Here's a new compression arm to play with. These are just held on by 2 bolts. And oh, you did it again! Is laziness an acceptable excuse today? It is, because I'm getting a lot done. It's not torqued. That was just a brap to run it down. Alright, calm down, Jaffer. Stop! You know what's next, right? Volk Metalcraft 2G lower control arms with serviceable ball joints, and there's some aluminum bushings zip tied through the fork hole. That's why you see me juggling some snips in here while I'm putting it together. This is the reason why all of you watch me do my bolt inventory. With as hard of a time as the restorations of these parts have given me and so many others just to make them all look and fit like this, I gotta say, it's nice to finally be at the stage that's not like any of that other crap. Now I'm opening boxes, I'm clearing shelves, I'm installing parts that fit and all the threads work. That was all the hard parts. Thank you for being here to watch me do the fun part. And this is the fun part, because for where this car is at in its build process, I don't have to torque anything yet. In fact, it actually worked against me. I expect to have to be making adjustments and taking these parts on and off a few times moving forward. I actually need the car fully assembled and at full weight to finish this job correctly. You didn't get to see me unwrap and clean the one threaded hole on each one of the strut forks because you already know how that works. If there's anything of note, it's that I left the powder coating inside the fork hole area there, which, yeah, I know it makes it a tighter fit, but it leaves it completely sealed from the elements against the aluminum bushing. All 4 lower arms, both wishbones, the coilovers, all for this moment. Let's go ahead and hang those knuckles. I didn't weigh these things, but they're extremely heavy, fully assembled. That would be some good science here that I actually want. Maybe we'll have to get back to that one. I'm sure by now somebody else has already done it. The interesting difference between a 1G and a 2G front knuckle is the number of attachment points to the chassis. The 2G has 4 because of the compression arm, so you got 3 ball joints, 4 if you count the tie rod, which is another type of ball joint all in itself. Hanging it on there, spinning down a bunch of nuts, that went flawlessly without using tools, and this moment right here is when I'm so glad that I prepared and assembled the complete knuckles first. Seriously, doesn't this look fun and easy? You'll see me mean mug from the concentration, but I know where everything goes, and after like 350 videos or something like that, I'm finally making one where everything just falls into place the first time. Isn't this a whole lot different than my previous work where I have to clean and repair everything? I thought you guys deserved one like this by now. If you appreciate what you're looking at here, I've gone through great lengths to document every step and stage of the recipe that I've used to create this and show everyone exactly how I did it. And in only a handful of videos. Yeah, they're long videos, but not in contrast to what I went through doing it. It was a year ago when I disassembled my Galant far enough to put it in the other bay and set this GSX on my lift. Since that time, I've rebuilt the steering rack, subframe, suspensions, drive shafts, axles, arms, bearings, bushings, and brakes of both of these cars. 0-mile resets on 2 chassis. Everything new or restored. I'm actually in a place with my DSMs right now that I've never been in before, because it used to only be engine and drivetrain parts that ever saw love. But I've made more progress on that Galant since it was put back together, and it's time for this GSX to catch back up with it. You didn't think I was just going to wrap this one up in the whole front end in 7 minutes and quit with no torque specs, part numbers, or technical details, did you? Well, we're not done, and I'm working on that. It's coming. I've got the technical part for this finished already, and I'll fill in all that other stuff before we're done here. I've got the torque specs already. We'll come back to this. This car's 30th birthday is in October, and I'm on a schedule trying to get more presents installed in it. 30 years for any production car is a really big deal. There's already been a ton of foreshadowing about this. Shootouts and conversations tend to cause things. This is Volk Metalcraft's 2G rear subframe, and that's what you're looking at here. It does exactly the same thing as that shiny powder-coated aluminum bushed subframe we just installed in the front does, just in the back. And it boxes in the rear end with lots of extra mounting points for both the differential carrier assembly snout and 4 points through the differential cover to lock and box that entire casting into place exactly where it's supposed to be at all times. And here we have a pair of single adjustable rear trailing arms. Bushed spherical joint, great stuff. These aren't actually part of the subframe setup. I want what's in that box right there. And oh look, it's an adjustable tow arm. And of course there's 2 of them, both equipped with bolts and aluminum bushings. A lower arm with a hemispherical mount and a joint for a sway bar. Also equipped with aluminum bushings and a bolt. 2 of those. The sway bar mount's optional, and most of the drag racers don't use one, which is why that mount's optional. I'm building a street car, so I want mine. All the bolts for the sway bar bushing brackets and differential cover extensions are included in this conveniently sealed bag, and I've got polyurethane bushings and freshly powder-coated factory sway bar brackets ready to go. Don't forget that I've already collected the rest of the bolts that I need to replace with that Amayama order, and all the other bolts that I cleaned up and treated with Caswell black oxide solution. Everything's been inventoried and bagged so that I know where I'd find it right here in this moment for this install. And I'm glad I did all of it. I cleaned up all the threads on the captive bolts that secure the subframe. They don't come out, so you have to bring the wire wheel to them. I also took the time to run the thread chase nut thing down on all 4 of them to pay it forward. Now for the rear subframe install. This is not the main event. This is just my test fit. If I were permanently installing this, the body would already be painted. I'm not using a transmission jack for this thing or anything like that because this is easy enough for me to just hold this in place while I get 2 threads on 2 nuts so I can take my time with the rest. I can't say that about the stock one. It's so much heavier than this thing. If this were a proper installation video, I'd be telling you first to modify and reinstall your fuel filler neck tube to make clearance for the subframe and then to mount your differential first before doing this. My actual goal is to roll this thing out of here into the future. I'm tired of busting my head on it. I did do a little bit to make the back look a little bit nicer, only about an hour, and I spent 90% of my effort where things bolt on where I can't reach once it's assembled. My slackness everywhere else won't be a problem at all here soon, because here come the rear coilovers. My factory suspension always performed spectacularly on this car, even with the worn out bushings, but I was only making a little over 400 horsepower with it before. It'll be nice to have adjustability for damping, spring load, and ride height going forward with these. These are going to do just fine. I also have brand new rear upper wishbones to install. All 4 of these are unique from one another. Each corner has its own part number. The offset position of the mount is oriented forward of the center line on the rear struts. That's how you know you've got the right one for the right side that you're working on. The wishbones here are fastened down with 4 bolts each, unlike the front ones that just get 2 nuts each. Pretty easy not to get the front and rear ones mixed up. I feel like installing some toe arms now. Super easy on this one. Pull the bolt out of it, put a bushing on the bolt, slide the bolt through the mount with the arm inserted, then slide the other bushing through the hole because it actually does fit inside the hole on the subframe. And when you tighten down the nut with the bushings, they're sized in such a way that you get the perfect crush on all of it to lock it down with 0 play. It's carefully engineered for this. Make sure this is all situated correctly before you torque the nuts, which I'm not doing right now for reasons I've already explained. The lower arms actually install the exact same way. The only thing you need to be aware of is if you're using the upper hole on the subframe mount, all the arms need to be in the upper holes. If you use the lower hole, all the arms need to be in the lower holes. You basically introduce bump steer to the rear axle if you don't get that part right. Here's a close-up of what I'm talking about with the bushing order and how they fit. I know I wasn't close enough in that last shot. The lower arms have this beefy golden tapered washer that's oriented with the big flat sides facing away from the joint. The taper gives them more freedom of movement while adding strength to the lower arms from their thickness, and it centers the joint because these are the arms that absorb all the weight. All your car's weight. The aluminum bushings on the toe arms can slide right through the hole just like I described. You just preload one on the bolt before you feed it the arm and the other bushing and the nut. Let's see if anyone passes the quiz. And of course I've got this other rear wishbone to install. I had to really work a chase through those holes to clean them out real good first. This isn't a permanent install either. If you wanted to do this job right, use a waterproof thread sealer on these bolts to keep the weather outside of the body. It acts as a preservative on the threads too. If they're not in contact with air or moisture, they won't rust. So now what? Yep. This one's tricky because you have to stab a bolt through it. I always point the bolts towards the back of the car so that they're self-cleaning regarding any encounters with migratory plastic bags. I've already won the cut axle boot lottery before with that one. With the knuckle hanging from the upper bushing and the strut mount, attach the lower arm and it would be a smart thing to use some grease. Don't worry it gets greased, just let's get through this, shall we? Once you've got the lower arm in place, the other pieces fall together. The toe arm's pretty important as you assemble the rest of the pieces. Its double adjustable design means that you can loosen the lock nuts and add or remove toe simply by turning the arm. You shouldn't ever have to struggle to fit any of the ball joints or bushings through any of the holes ever after this thing's installed. This will make more sense as we go forward because there's several other things that you can do to make this job even easier on yourself. Like hang the knuckle from the bottom strut mount first and let the strut dangle all of its weight while you sort out the other connections. After picking one of these assemblies up, the sooner you can put it down, the longer the rest of your life is going to be. I did that backwards on the other side and you saw what that looked like. See what I mean about how everything else just sort of seems to fall together once the lower arm is on? Now, let's deal with these restored brake cables before I scratch them all up. 3 brackets. 2 bolts and a nut, but the gas tank isn't here so I can't bolt that one down yet, and And why did you have to say everything falls into place? Is this payback for using that impact wrench earlier? It is, isn't it? There's a snapped bolt more than flush inside this hole. I tried everything drilling it with the worst drill bits ever until I broke them. I used oil, I used fire, I used hammers and punches, and after yet another drill bit sacrifice, I tried Matt's extractor set. Left-hand drill bit. Nice. Well used. Cut right through it like butter, but I still broke it. Had to buy him another one. Not the extractor, the drill bit. The extractors didn't work. I eventually had to drill it nearly all the way out. If your drill is a little bit offset, going in, doing this a little offset can help because you can finish with a smaller drill bit and save the threads, which I did. Managed to chase them back into shape, but this has gone on for long enough. Let's move back to the other good part of the video. I pretty much put the kibosh on my nice, clean, easy-going toolless video, didn't it? Thanks a lot, Stuck Bolt. So that left me cleaning up the rear trailing arm bolts because I might as well finish this up and go ahead and put those things on. These are coated bolts, and I actually managed to clean off all the surface rust, which may have been environmental, but I did it without removing the coating from these bolts. That was neat. These are 2G rear trailing arms. The interesting thing about these things, unlike the 1Gs, which actually have toe adjustment here at this place where it would attach to the body, see, this would attach to the 2G rear knuckle, but there's no toe adjustment here. The bolts that are on here are just made this way to hold them still while you torque them down. There's actually no adjustment whatsoever for toe with these. These are trailing arms. They're in the front. Very different. The Volk Metalcraft rear subframe kit does not require that you replace these in order for you to install that kit and still have all of the camber and toe adjustments that it provides. However, they do sell them, and these are the ones I'm going to use because I want my rear suspension to all be homologous parts, all the same kind of parts and match, and these are absolutely beautiful. But the first thing that you need to do before you start installing the subframe actually starts with these arms. If you don't replace them, then there's nothing that you have to do. Most of it will go together pretty easily and line up okay if you set everything to the right length at that point. But when it comes to installing these with these arms, the first thing you need to do is match these to the length of these. And I just do that using a couple of bolts. Basically, you set it up like so, and there's actually a bushing that you can install in these. You should install in these. That has the bolt diameter already cut on the inside. And if you see here, that hole doesn't line up. And that bolt's a little too big. I can do it this way. Can't do anything with that. So the trick on this is to loosen that lock nut, back this thing off until you get it approximately the right length. And check your work. It's going to be a little bit of slop because one of these bolt holes is bigger than the other, which is the reason why you need to turn this around and do it backwards. Make sure you got the same amount of slop on both sides, and that's your starting point. That'll help you line everything else up. Leave these set to that length. In fact, this is the point in time where you would lock this down and then go install it on the car. Juggling act. I just finished explaining how to avoid the struggle that you're about to see. This is the side that I did more correctly for a short explanation. If something doesn't fit right, adjust that toe arm and try again. Surprise, now it fits. Changing the toe will move all the angles in the bolt centers, so if it's fighting you, you either aren't lined up and need to adjust that toe arm, or you didn't use grease. The other side of the car I struggled pretty good with before figuring all that good advice out about the trailing arm length the hard way all by myself. That's what matters here. You also need to do this for your front lower control arms as well. You got to match their lengths as well. If you do this, all your wheels will have the potential to be centered and named correctly when you're done. If you do it to all the arms, match all of their lengths to the millimeter, then you're likely going to be able to drive it in a straight line all the way to the alignment shop as fast as you want. These Volk arms fit the factory subframes too. You just don't get the same kind of weight savings as you do with this entire subframe kit. And there you have it. If this were a straight line car, I'd be done already. But this one's a street car, and I'm just going to use this car's original sway bar, which I had powder coated. I've got all my other pieces prepped, and the first thing that I want to do is make sure that I have the right bushing, and I do. I'm going to go ahead and glove up because I hate this grease. There are the cap screws and bushings included with these arms that allow you to use the factory fasteners to secure the other side of the sway bar. And I've got brand new ones fresh out of the bag for this job. I just wish it was easier. It's an awkward stretch to hold this thing up here, but I'm getting it. In the bolt bag, you'll find 4 of these bolts, washers, and nylon lock nuts for the sway bar bushing brackets. You'll get to reuse your factory bushing brackets on these. But before we get to that, I need to grease the bushings, install both of them on the sway bar, grease the outside of the bushings, and mash the brackets on. You can use the same factory spec for everything on the sway bars. Every single nut and bolt related to a front and rear 2G sway bar is 28 foot-pounds. I'm just going for good and tight. Same goes for the end links. Until I have a differential ready, that's about it for the subframe kit. That's all I can do. All this new stuff is awesome, and my goal is to dial it in to be solid, reliable, and predictable. The weight savings is nice, and I should know what it is, except that weight wasn't my concern here. I did this to solve problems with the factory differential mounts for high horsepower builds. Jeffrey, why are you so fixated on the sway bar end links? Oh yeah, I see what you mean. That's going to move with the wheel travel, and it's kind of maxed out with the stock 95 rear sway bar on it. That's not where I need that to be right there. I got a problem. That's nuts. And this is the slow motion part of the video where 3 bearded guys meet up behind the bleachers at a public event for the exchange, right under everyone's noses, where nobody's ever going to suspect a thing. That's right. Yeah, pretty sure everybody saw that. Act natural. Act natural. That package contained a brand new product from Volk Metalcraft that fixes my pickle. There are bushing spacers that come with longer bolts. Look them up if you need these. I believe they're different thicknesses, but I sent them pictures of what I had, and this is what happened. I gotta sing praises about the support I've received. I bought a product off of a website, received it, sat on it for over a year, finally installed it, had a problem, emailed them, and was talking to the guy that made it on my phone in less than 4 hours from the time that I reached out. Though I'd already figured out the problem, he explained that he had just completed his first batch of the solution for my problem. So Volk makes E-coated spacers that match the rest of the parts, and I get to be one of the first people out there to have them installed in their car. It's as easy as unbolting the bushings, inserting the spacers with the longer bolts, and bolting them all back down again. I transferred the nylon lock nuts to the longer bolts that came with the flange nuts, just for added vibration protection. They offer, and that's the only thing that I did differently with the kit. They're invisible. That looks so much better now. The end links are centered in the joint now, right where I need them to be. This is going to work. I can see pretty clearly that I'm not going to be able to install a differential without removing the whole subframe, but I can remove all of this with only 8 bolts. The 4 nuts on the subframe, strut bolts, trailing arm bolts. Comes out in one big piece, but just watch out for those e-brake cables. The only thing left to do now is to make it roll. Yo dog, heard you like 4 doors. And in order to make that happen, first I have to snatch the shafts out of the front hubs of my Galant. Because next we're going to jam them in the rear of my GSX and put nuts on them. I do the same thing for the front end as well. Give it something soft to rest on because I'm not trying to hurt it and trying to be nice here, and put it down on all 4s. First time it's been on the ground in a whole year. It still needs one of everything else, but this is a huge step because I have my lift back, and getting this out of here gets me that much closer to bodywork and paint. That's where this one's going. What I showed Mark doing with the dry ice blaster to number 148 and 1229 was incredible. I really don't need to spend months cleaning out every single nook and cranny of this car after this thing sat for 11 years untouched, just so that I can then evaluate my starting point. I need to get right to fixing the body. This mess is in the way. The cost is worth it for the time it's going to save me, so you bet this one's going to go to the same place for the exact same treatment as the Gallants. But if I want to get it there, I've got to put a steering column back in it and get a working parking brake assembly, or else this thing's going to be a real nuisance to everyone involved. I wouldn't make any friends sending it out of here with a couple blocks of wood. 11 bolts hold this thing in here, including the one that's in the engine bay, and I was pretty meticulous with labeling and sorting for these. I know you're expecting to see me installing electric power steering assist with this right now, but I'm actually not finished removing the rest of this car's electrical system quite yet. That's happening too. I also want to remove my side skirts pretty bad, and I can now because my access is not being blocked by the lift anymore. I know it's filthy back here and I need to be able to get back there to clean all of it. My side skirts are in near mint condition and so are the end caps really, but the door trim is a whole different story. I've been looking high and low for these things. I've made several contacts and I'll work my way around. I think I found a set that this car needs, but you know, this one, I tried, bro. Thank you. These were 2GB actually. Definitely grateful for the effort. I thought we had it. But to finish up that e-brake, before trying to get too fancy with the adjustment that's inside the car, first you want to set each one of the drum brakes drags because changing one changes the other. And that's why your e-brake handle feels clapped out when the brake pads are at the end of their lives. It's the adjustment that's off. There's a specific factory procedure with a spring gauge that's extra scientific and nerdy, but if you've done this enough times to enough cars over your lifetime, it's got a feel to it that you've learned by now. A DSM just makes it really easy because there's an inspection plug where you can pull and access the brake adjusters. You just ratchet it up until it barely touches, and lots of other cars have this plug too, but there's a lot of them out there that don't. So on those you have to take the old drum off to adjust it, but that's why I said these are easy. Just remember to put your plug back in there before you put your wheel on. But with the brake drag set, now the adjustment that you make inside the cabin matters. This is actually meaningful now. I'm not hooking up the hydraulics yet, just the parking brake, and now I get to put it all back together one last time before the GSX takes its field trip. I love how the pieces of these projects are all falling together now. Restoring every single part of 2 all-wheel drive DSMs and a JDM in a year's time has been a challenging one because of how many moving parts there are, how hard they are to find, and how many people's time are involved with all the things that I'm trying to accomplish in my restorations. There's even more going on behind the scenes right now that's taken over a year to complete, and I'm excited about getting started on this next phase. I still have to pull the wiring harness and find a way to roll the window up afterwards, but this thing's going to be easy to transport and handle for now. And we'll go over the gritty details of the body repairs, rear differential rebuild, axles, the fuel filler, and the gas tank stuff. We'll cover that once it comes back. I just assembled the entire front and rear end in a single video, and I used all of the Volk parts that were available for the front and rear, including the ones that were just released. I hope this helps make sense of how to put all this stuff together to other people who are considering that, because there's no instructions included in boxes that contain custom-made parts like these. I've turned it back into an official roller though, but not without the help of a whole lot of incredible people. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Patreon. You guys rock. I will work my butt off to show my gratitude to the people that let me keep doing this. And thank you for all the ideas and encouragement through all of this in the comments. Until next time, stay tubed.